What's up, guys? Week 2 of Anthems, and I'm excited to be back with you. And let me just start off ask you this question. Have you ever forgot about something and then you're like, crap, I should have wrote that down. Like, I really should have written that down. Like, I can remember one time I was trying to impress Caitlin when we were dating, and I called my mom and I was like, hey, send me that, or can you tell me how to make a cheesecake? Because it was one of Caitlin's favorites, and I was in her roommate's favorite. So I'm just trying to impress her and her friends, right? And so my mom like talks through the whole thing on the phone, and I hang up, and like 5 minutes into making this, I'm like, well, totally forgot everything. I should have written that down. I should have put it down. And a lot of times in life, I think you can maybe relate, your memory fails you. You're thinking about something and you're like, what's the name of that song? Or what's the name of that movie? Or who's that actor? We all have instances where memories fail us. But on the other side of that, though, we also have times where memories are beautiful and amazing. So do this. Pause this video right now. And this might be a hard question, so you can kind of, maybe not your most, but the best memory you have. Like, what's the most important memory that you have? What's the most important memory you have? Pause this video. Y'all talk about it real fast. So, I mean, I can think of numerous memories that I think back in, like my grandmother meeting my child, or me hitting a home run in one of my Little League baseball games, or I graduate. There's so many memories that I have that are meaningful to me, and remembering, keeping stories alive is very important for you and I, and just in general, the human experience, right? However, some of us are better at living in the now or looking forward to the future than actually remembering in the past. And for some of you, memories in the past are hard and they're hurtful, and you don't want to remember those things. But then at the same time, you have memories in your past that you do care about and that you want to have. And then some memories are just like unconscious memories, like that song comes on the radio and you can immediately start singing it, and you never sat down and studied the words. You've just heard it over and over and over again. Or even some of you've used rhymes or songs to help you remember something, like nursery rhymes when you were younger. There's a lot of things that you probably did to help you learn those or remember those. And we probably all learned to sing the alphabet, right? A, B, C, D. You are probably singing it in your head right now. Sorry about that. Or name the animals on Old MacDonald's farm, right? Old MacDonald, yep, sorry for that one again. Or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Or maybe if you're advanced, you did the row, row, row your boat, and then you did it with a friend and you like spaced it out. It was, you know what I'm talking about if you know what I'm talking about. Or even the words to the Happy Birthday song. Or maybe even you've seen on Jimmy Fallon where they do a game where they hit a button and it says like a singer in a nursery rhyme, and they have to sing the nursery rhyme like the singer. Watch this clip real fast. It's incredible. Maybe y'all can do it after group tonight or figure that out, but just watch this video real fast.
So, all right, so Britney Spears, who we all know,
okay,
and Mary Had a Little Lamb,
all right,
which is pretty, yeah. So, Ruth, can we give her a little music here for Britney Spears?
So sometimes we use songs, rhymes, rhythms to help us remember things, and these handy devices can help us. They can help us remember things, but they can also not only help us remember the alphabet or animals, but bigger things as well. And last week we started this series exploring the book of Psalms, and It's a collection of songs, rhymes, rhythms written by and for the nation of Israel and for us today. And just like these songs reminded them of important things, they should remind us of important things. They wrote down some of the things that God had done for them, and so that when times were tough, when they were struggling, it would be easy to trust God. And even if things were looking bleak, they were able to go back and look at what God had done. And I'm going to kind of like give you a few examples. I don't want to do it kind of like breaking news, right? Okay, so for instance, Israel on the run, right? Let me give you, it's a little time scope. Israel on the run. After years of enslavement, late last night, the Israelites fled the nation of Egypt under the protection of God, right? Or cloudy with a chance of quail, right? Eyewitness accounts says food is falling from the sky, flocks of birds and mysterious bread-like substance have appeared in the desert just in time to save the Israelites from starvation. Or Israel undefeated, right? After yet another confrontation with enemy armies, Israel remains undefeated in battle due to mysterious and miraculous circumstances. If you have a lot of experiences with church, and some of these stories you're familiar with, and if so, it's easy or difficult for you to recall the details, whether you've heard these stories a lot or not. And these stories really made up the national history of Israel. So imagine you've witnessed God do an incredible miracle today. All right, let me ask you this question. How would you share that important story with others? Like, what tools or channels of communication would you use? Pause this video, y'all talk about that real fast. All right, for some of you, maybe you put just journal it, write it down. Maybe for some of you, you're like, make a TikTok or post it on Instagram or Facebook, or hey, I would call the news station and tell them about it. But what if you couldn't write? Like, what if you couldn't write, or what if you could not film, or what if anyone around you didn't know how to read, or everyone around you didn't know how to read? What if you didn't have internet or phones, computers, radio, news? Like, then what would you do? See, without important tools like paper, ink, video, phones, internet, electricity, it's hard to even imagine how you would begin to spread the word about important facts or stories. Even if you've managed to tell 100 people, then what, right? Like, I guess they could tell others, but what if important details were left out, et cetera, et cetera? What about 10 years into the future or 100 years into the future? As time passed, how you could, like, the story communicated might change. And in a time and place where people had very few ways to communicate other than talking face to face, the Israelites had to get creative. And to make sure these stories of God's miracles were remembered and retold from generation to generation, sometimes what would happen was they would stack huge rocks in a place where important things happen. Or they would rename locations or even people after God did something miraculous. Maybe they established new traditions, holidays, and feasts to help them not forget. And of course, they could write songs to tell stories. And they sang these songs during holidays and feast and worship services. So let me ask you this question. Why do you think we need so many reminders about who God is and what God has done? Like, why do you think that is? Why do you think, or do you think that we need a lot of reminders to remind us of who God is and what He's done? Pause this video, y'all talk about that for a second. See, there are 15 very short songs in the book of Psalms. And it's believed that the Israelites used these to sing songs like Psalm 120 through 134 on their way to worship God in a temple or at one of like their feasts that they celebrated together. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to pause this video and we're going to read Psalm 120 through Psalm 134. Just breathe. They're very short, and so it won't take too long. And then what we're going to do is, once again, kind of look through themes that stood out to you. So maybe break up into groups or stay together if you would like. Read Psalm 120 through Psalm 134. Pause this video right now. So maybe trusting God was a theme that you saw, or everything's going wrong was a theme you saw, or enemies are attacking, or God rescued or helped them, or God heard their prayers, or God did something amazing. The pattern of these Psalms is really simple, and it's a helpful formula for you and I to remember to give God praise. In each of these Psalms, the psalmist says something like this: I'm in trouble, or we're in trouble. We called out to God and he heard and he helped. Then he rescued us or helped us. We trusted God and God helped us. And then as a result of that, God deserves our praises. And even when we look at Jesus' life, he sometimes used these Psalms. In fact, in Matthew chapter 26, what we see is right before the Passover, Jesus is celebrating this meal with his disciples, and after they sang a hymn together, and most likely during the Passover, Psalm 116 was a psalm that would be sung, and even beyond that, Psalms 113 through 117 were ones that they sang during this time. And so let's take a look at Psalm 116 specifically, and see what Jesus may have sung to his followers, or his followers would have sung together. So pause this video, turn to Psalm 116 and read it. So just as God's plan to save the world through Jesus was going to come to pass, Jesus himself was singing songs of remembrance about who God is, and how God is a God who saves. And God created humans to be in relationship with God. And that's a beautiful thing, but something happened. Because of sin, that relationship was broken. You and I were created to be in relationship with God, but because of sin, that relationship was broken. And God's people were promised that one day there would be a permanent solution to this brokenness, and that one day there would be a way for this relationship to be made right. And for us who have the Bible now and see kind of a bigger picture, that solution was Jesus. And just like Jesus remembered the words of the psalmist, and the psalmist remembered the incredible things God has done, we are called to remember that as well. And we may not be as good at remembering details, but we can learn to remember stories of God's goodness and praise God for them. And these songs we can find in Psalms are worth remembering. Like, we can remember these Psalms because here's the reality. We worship to remember what God has done. We worship to remember what God has done. And so let me ask you this question. Are there any songs that help you remember what God has done for you, right? Maybe you've been through a hard time and there was a song that really helped you get through that. Or other than singing, what are ways that you can practice remembering what God has done for that? So pause this video. We'll talk about that for a second. Was there a worship song or maybe a song that really helped you get through a tough time, or a song that was really awesome that you celebrated something that God has done? So pause this video. Talk about a song that's helped you remember what God has done for you, or even maybe something other than a song that has helped you remember what God has done for you. Pause this video right now. So even like right now, if you're not feeling full of faith, here's the thing: worship anyway. Because remembering what God has done and responding in worship can actually help you build your faith. And let me ask you this question: does maybe any of you guys journal, like, or have a diary, or maybe through an app or through a website or through a book? If you use a journal, like, I want to encourage you, this is an awesome way to write down stuff about what God has done. Write down prayer requests to where He answered them. It's important that journals help us remember what happened, what took place, what we thought about what happened, and how we felt through that. And over time, as our memories fail us, we can go back to the journals and see those moments and feelings that we might have otherwise forgotten or misremembered. And so maybe for you, maybe journaling might be a cool option for you to remember what God has done for you. And it doesn't need to include like 8 to 12 pages per experience. Maybe for you, you like to write that. Some people even like make their journaling public on a blog for people to see and read in real time. But what do you think would happen if you made an effort to journal regularly to help you remember what God has done for you? And so this week I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to do something. Write your own psalm. Like write a psalm that's specific to your life using the pattern that we saw, right? Of identifying a struggle or a challenge that you or maybe even your community is facing. And think about how you called out to God next and how God responded during that time. And then when we trust God, God helps us. So identify how trusting in God helped you in that circumstance and what you've learned about trusting God. And then lastly, think about the ways and reasons God is deserving of praise because of that, based on your specific circumstance. And then now write a verse about each of those steps, and that's your psalm. And maybe if you want to share it with me or share it with someone. God has done amazing things for us individually, for us as communities, for humanity as a whole, and we can remember those amazing things through worship, through telling God. And let's not let our worship end here. Let's continue to worship throughout this week as we try to remember to worship because God has done amazing things for us. And so that's my challenge to you guys today is that, hey, stop and think, man, what has God done for you? And if you haven't ever written that down or recorded like a video of you saying that, do that so that in years to come, when you're maybe facing challenges or you're struggling to hang on with God, that you could go back and see yourself talk about God's faithfulness or read from your own personal journal what God has done. So I hope you have a great rest of the night hanging out with your friends and talking more about this, and we'll see you guys next week.